Hey guys, and welcome to one more episode of Builder Nation. For today's agenda, we have LeGrand Crewse, President, CEO, and Co-Founder of Super73, the electric motorbike company based in Orange County. LeGrand, if you can maybe share a little bit about you, about your background, I know that you're not an engineer, so I think this is really interesting because I noticed that you went to school for business, right? So why the interest in this kind of industry?
Yeah. So not formally trained as an engineer, as you mentioned, but obviously you already made an intro. My background actually was all business formal training, but funny enough, by being so obsessed with electric transportation and specifically two-wheel transportation, the engineering piece in a lot of ways has been self-taught, and that I've had to learn obviously how things work, certainly as it relates to my industry and to the vehicles that we build.
Did you always have like this interest in motorbikes or in this kind of like transportation?
Yeah, in this space. So, going back to my childhood, one of the memories that has been with me from the moment it happened was when I was turned 5 years old. I got my very first bicycle, like many kids do, and that was my ticket to freedom. And at that point, I just became obsessed with my bicycle, and that carried through throughout my childhood. And so even as a teen, I got more serious about it, and so I actually did some mountain bike racing. I was a big mountain biker when I was in high school and kind of a teenager, and so again, I had a real big passion for the sport, specifically of mountain biking, and then again, that just kind of carried through adulthood, and it's obviously a much longer story, but eventually that's kind of what led into electric bikes. And then as anything, one thing leads to another, and next thing you know, I'm riding motorcycles and becoming obsessed with kind of all things transportation related.
Okay, so you kind of had like that into you from your childhood, but I noticed that the company is not only you and one co-founder, but there are actually four. So how did you and Aaron come up with this idea?
So initially, like many companies, there was kind of a lot of people when we got started, and I think very quickly, it eventually got down to a few. So if you look at how we began and where we ended up now, the current makeup of the company, there's really kind of three of us that kind of run the show now in terms of being in charge of kind of the major parts of the business. And so that would be myself, Aaron, and Michael. And what we kind of three all brought to the table were very, very different skill sets, that ultimately really meshed together and what created the company and the brand and the success that we've had. So myself, I certainly brought more of that product experience, operations, manufacturing, the engineering piece, if you would, and then of course the business background, which is my formal training. And Aaron Long was more of the brand specialist. He was big into fashion. He definitely knows what's cool out there much more than I do. He brought that factor, that sneaker culture, that cool factor in a way. And then Michael has brought this viral marketing piece. So his background was that he was a creator on the Vine platform. I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
Wow. So he was a creator on that platform, and so really kind of understood how to communicate with kind of younger people through social media. And so he's been instrumental in a lot of the viral marketing content that you've seen from us. So again, the three of us kind of brought these very different pieces together that really fit in and ultimately created the company and the brand that you know today.
And you mentioned the branding, right? And I think it's super interesting when it comes to, the hardware part, the electrical part, how the bicycles are built. But at the end of the day, I noticed that something that it's really, really noticeable about the brand, about the company, is that it's really easy to use, and that it's really cool, if we can put it like that. Like, people are riding your bikes with bands and with sneakers. So how will you say this has been creating an impact on the culture?
Yeah, so I think what's important, and I guess I'm going to take a more of a North America or a U.S. perspective in this, is that in the U.S., for example, we think of any kind of two-wheel transportation, meaning that bicycles or motorcycles, we think of those as recreation. And so one of the things that we wanted to accomplish and still do to this day is we wanted to make this form of transportation not only something that you want to, that utility, obviously, that you can use on the daily basis, but that you want to use, that you enjoy riding, that you're proud to own, that it looks cool, that you want to be seen on one. If you look at electric bicycles before Super 73, they were kind of for old people. They were very traditional bicycles with little motors put on them, and it really wasn't anything compelling. And ultimately, it's why we built the bikes that we did. Is we were a group of 20 and 30 somethings, and we were like, there's nothing for us, so let's go create it. And so it's been a really big part, I think, of how we built the company. Is ultimately we said, hey, let's solve a problem for people our age, and it turns out that a lot of people like it and a lot of people want it, so it's worked out.
And something that it's like really of your brand of Super 73 is that the fat tires are like something, right? I know that they help for balance, but what else would you say that it's like a key factor in order to build a motorbike?
Yeah, so the fat tires are something that I've been obsessed with ever since I first saw one on a bicycle. And this goes back over 10 years. And so, me personally, again, I've always just been a big fan of flat tires. And there's kind of two things that you get with fat tires, besides, of course, looking super cool, right? But, one, like you mentioned, is if you are uncomfortable on a two-wheeled platform, whether it be a bicycle or a motorcycle, the fat tires do add some stability. You have more contact area on the ground, and so that's an important piece of feeling comfortable on a bike, especially if you don't ride all the time. But then the other piece is those fat tires. They also provide a lot of comfort because they have a lot more cushion for the tire to move. And so in an urban environment where you have the roads in Southern California are not so great all the time, and there's a lot of things in the road and obstructions and bumps and everything like that. So it really helps to smooth out the ride. So it kind of serves more than one purpose. And again, it's become kind of an identity for our brand as well.
And how do you feel the brand has changed in the last, I don't know, couple of years, talking about ergonomics?
It's interesting. We started off with a single bike. Today we have 10. And what we've done is we've kind of just expanded the scope of our product in terms of who it's for. So initially, like I mentioned, we had tried to build something that was for us, 20, 30-year-olds and something that was cool and that would, get us around kind of our urban area or suburban areas. Fast forward to today, and we just announced about 7 months ago now, in fact, right behind me here, I don't know if you can see it, we're going to be making an electric motorcycle now, as well as some youth products. So we've really expanded to cover what we say is everybody from the youth to the youth at heart. And I'm closer to the youth at heart now, so but it's been a fun journey.
Have you been surprised of the kind of customers that you have discovered in the way? Like you mentioned at the beginning, like, yes, it was originally for young people, but have you ever had a customer that it's maybe a little bit older or maybe even younger than you expected?
In both directions. So our core vehicles, they appeal to everybody. And what's happened locally here in Southern California is that teenagers have become just obsessed with the bikes. I mean, if you want to be the cool kid, you've got to have a Super 73. And so what you'll see is these, I don't want to call them gangs, but groups, let's say, of teens that will roll around on their Super 73s everywhere. And you can see them all throughout Southern California. So it's really become a phenomenon in that respect. The other side of the coin is we have some amazing customers that definitely don't fit our normal demographic. One in particular is an elderly person. He's in his 70s. He has an oxygen tank that he mounts on his bike because he has to breathe through oxygen. And he rides all the time, and he loves his Super 73. And so it's been pretty amazing to see, again, all the way from teens to, somebody at the later stages of life that has to have oxygen, and they still want to get out and enjoy our product. So it's been really satisfying to see that.
It must be super rewarding, like going outside in the street and then, hey, there's my product. And I mean, I'm curious, talking about branding, let's say, why Super 73? Where did the name come from?
Yeah, I would say if it's not the number one question, it's usually the number one and number two question that we get asked. So it's, so the Super 73 name actually had very humble beginning. Initially, we didn't start the company thinking we were starting a company. We started just, making a product, and we put it on a Kickstarter, and we said, we'll sell, I think the goal was to sell enough so that we could each get one, right? That was the goal. So we actually named the first product Super 73. And then, of course, that eventually became the company name. And the reason it was Super 73 is when we built the first bike, we kept using super as adjective to describe everything. We were writing, we're like, wow, this is super cool, it's super fun, it's super fast. And, so we just kept using the word super. And so we said, okay, super, we need to call it super something. And I think initially we thought maybe super bike, but that doesn't work. So then we kind of settled on, okay, we're going to do a number. And ultimately what we settled on was the 73. And the 73 actually has some significance. And I wasn't around in 1973, but if you go back to the history books, what you'll see is that 1973 was a really pivotal year, especially here globally, but really here in the US. That was the height of the oil crisis when gas prices spiked. And what happened is there was this big shift in the country to move to smaller, more personal forms of mobility. So in Southern California, specifically, there became a movement towards these small format two-wheeled vehicles like mopeds and these mini bikes. And so part of the inspiration of the first bike that we built was these, what they call taco mini bikes. We heavily modified it and obviously created something unique, but that was the basis of the first bike. So we thought that 73 had some significance in terms of naming the actual product.
Wow, it is a great story indeed. So you guys have been around for a couple of years now, and you survived the pandemic. You're still here, 2022. So did you have any, challenges when it comes to the procurement process? Maybe like getting the hardware parts in order to build the new motorbikes or something like that?
Yeah, the last 2 years, I guess now we're going on 2.5 years, has been incredibly challenging from a supply, logistics, and cost standpoint as well. We haven't been immune to what's going on. I mean, everybody, obviously, across all industries has suffered. And so yeah, it's been a really, really big challenge, but we've risen to the challenge. One of the things that was, I guess, a byproduct of the pandemic is we had quite a bit of increased demand. People being stuck in their homes and wanting to get outside. Cycling was one of the few things that you could actually do. And especially with the roads empty, a lot of people wanted to go out and, explore their neighborhood and their surrounding areas. So we had two things happen. We had demand increase at the same time that supply became a huge problem. But we've really expanded our workforce quite a bit. We've invested quite a bit in our operations. We have our own design engineering team in-house here in California. We also have our own R&D kind of lab where we can rapid prototype and create product there before we ever do mass manufacturing. And so what we were able to do over the last 2.5 years is when we ran into a challenge with certain components, we were able to in actually several instances design around the issue to then not have a huge supply problem.
I haven't heard that, and I can tell you I have had a lot of interviews with different CEOs, and they have mentioned how supply chain has been a big challenge in order to, to get some components in, especially talking about hardware. But wow, the fact that you guys have managed in order to design some parts.
Alternatives, yeah. Well, I'll give you one example actually. So, everybody's talking about the chips, right? Chips are hard to get and all this. We've suffered from the same thing. And it's not just chips, it's other electronic components. And one of the issues that we had is we have a display, it's an LCD display and it's round. And so there's only a couple of, manufacturers that make these round LCDs. And so we were having some major issues in getting the supply. So we were able to redesign the case to accept a square LCD. It still looks round, it still fits and looks to the consumer, there's no difference. But we're using now a different kind of LCD that is made by a whole lot of manufacturers. And so we were able to increase the supply dramatically by actually changing the design internally.
You make it sound so easy. I mean, how long did it take you guys in order to develop this kind of new chip or redesign this chip?
It's not a huge amount of time necessarily to do it. It's more of just deciding that, okay, is this really a solution, or not? Can we substitute that? And is the amount of time and money going to make it worth it, right? If it takes 6 months to redesign and another 6 months to deploy, but we're only 8 months from getting the parts, that maybe doesn't make sense. But in this case, we were able to turn this very, very quickly and start to make a difference.
And I mean, on your day-to-day life, I mean, I know that you're president, CEO, co-founder. Which role, if we can put it like that, enjoy the most, or which one do you actively participate more?
Gosh, I don't know which I participate more, but again, I'm a product guy. I love, if I could spend every single minute with the engineers and the designers and be in the lab and building things, that's what I would be doing. Unfortunately, I don't get to spend most of my time doing that anymore. But I do make it a point to spend as much time with those teams as I can. We have, regular meetings, regular updates. And if I have any spare time, I am straight over in that area. That's how I like to spend my time.
One of the last questions, I mean, we have talked about challenges and supply chain and redesigning chips and stuff like that. But I will say it has been maybe the biggest technical challenge that you guys have managed to solve, like starting back in the days, like until this point.
One of the biggest challenges that we had, and I don't think this has completely gone away, is that we've created a new segment in the industry that we're in, and one of the challenges with that is that really nothing in terms of components and process really fit our vehicles or what we were trying to accomplish. And what I mean by that is, this is. And I'll give you kind of a few different examples. So one, from a component level, we build a very different looking e-bike, right? It looks more like a kind of, a little bit of a moto bike, and it's just kind of this combination of things. And so you mentioned the tires, the fat tires. Well, the tires that were on the market, that we wanted to use fat tires, and there were some that kind of met our criteria in terms of the size and everything. But when we tested them, one of the problems we had is those tires were made for, very, very inexpensive kids bikes that went low speeds. And so at higher speeds, the tires, they wouldn't hold up very well and they weren't safe. So we actually had to design our own tires. We partnered with a tire manufacturer, and we actually designed our own tires. All of our tires are our own design because there was just nothing on the market that worked for us. And I wish I could say it was the tires, but it's almost been like component after component after component that we've, run into, and we've said, okay, there's nothing, and we're not willing to compromise on our vehicle, so we're just going to have to create it. And so we've taken that approach, and then that even extends into the assembly process of how the bikes are put together. So even at the manufacturing level, in terms of how to run the line and how to orient the bikes, we had to come up with different processes because what was existing just didn't fit. So yeah, we've definitely had a lot of challenges in terms of, figuring out how to even build our own product. But again, we kind of always have this mindset that one, nothing is impossible. And two, if it's going to compromise our product, then, we're just going to have to create something new and figure it out.
I can believe how hard it must have been, especially in the beginning, to see that the market is not providing anything that it's really worth it in order to build the product that you want to build. So I can imagine how stressful it must have been at the beginning, but how rewarding you must feel at this point of the company. Wow, so congratulations on that. Last but not least, I think that the last question, it will be like, what advice would you give to future entrepreneurs or people starting on the industry?
Yeah, I think the best advice to any entrepreneur, and one that I think I probably got at some point, is just jump in with both feet. Until you do, you just won't know what you have. If I look back and I think about what my biggest regrets are, really it's not having the courage to jump into starting my own business earlier than I did. I was 31 years old, so I already had a dozen years, I guess, and as an adult working for other people, doing other things. I always knew that I wanted to start my own business, and it took me over a decade to get the courage to actually do it. So, again, my biggest advice is that if that's the path that you want, if you want to create something new, like, just do it. And, who cares if you don't know how it's going to work out? I had no idea, electric bikes, I was obsessed with it, but I had no idea how to make money at it. I had no idea how to create a market or do any of that. But until I dedicated, myself completely to that cause, there was no way I was going to find out. So that would be my advice.
Great advice.
Yeah.
To anyone who is listening to us, guys, go ahead and jump straight and do it. Do you have any social media handles? Where can people find you? Where can people follow you or follow the company?
Yeah, so Super73, we are on all social media platforms. We're very active on Instagram, so you can follow us at Super73 on Instagram. Also, we are on TikTok if you are a little bit younger and use that platform. So we're on there. Of course, our website, super73.com. And then, if for whatever reason somebody wanted to follow me personally, my Instagram is the number 2 and then wheel, WHEEL, and then grand. So 2-wheel grand.
Amazing username. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thanks, Lisa.
Well, thank you so much, LeGrand. Remember, guys, that you can also find more interesting articles, interesting interviews, just like this one, directly on our website, controlhub.com/wheeler-nation. We would love to hear from you. And once again, LeGrand, thank you so much for taking the time, for sharing your experiences, your advice.